Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to draw some realistic lips using only basic supplies, no fancy art supplies, just stuff you probably already have at home. So just a regular pencil, a regular eraser, and for blending or shading we're going to be using a Q-tip. If you don't have a Q-tip, you can take a tissue and then you can sort of twist it into a little point like that, and you can use that for smudging and blending. So to start, I'm just going to draw a straight horizontal line. Then I'm going to draw a vertical line through the middle. Then on the bottom, I'm going to draw 2 circles on either side of that middle line. And then on the top, I'm going to draw a smaller circle that's centered on that middle line. So I'm going to start the Cupid's bow, which is that part of the top of your lip that comes in, and it's going to start in the middle of that top circle, and then it's going to come curved down to meet up with that central horizontal line. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side so it's somewhat symmetrical. Then in the middle of the bottom lip, it's going to sort of curve in a little bit between those 2 circles, and then it's going to come up and meet up with the line at the same point where the top line met to create the corners of the mouth there. So these are the 2 corners of the mouth. Alright, now to create the line between the lips, I'm going along the top circle to create sort of a little pout in the middle. Then it's going to curve up and curve back down before it meets the corner of the mouth. So curves down in the middle there a little bit, then curves up, then back down, then up again. Alright, so now I'm just going to clean things up and erase some of the lines and just clean up some of the lines I've already drew. So I don't need those circles anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and erase those. That vertical line, I don't need that anymore. The first horizontal line I drew, I don't need that anymore. So after you erase, you're just left with the basic outline of the shape of the lips. That little piece of paper that I have underneath my hand, that's just to keep me from smudging my drawing. I do that a lot. I just take a piece of scratch paper and I have it under my hand so that I'm not smudging the pencil. Alright, just cleaning up the lines some more with my eraser. Going over that line because I erased it a bit too much. Going over some of the lines that I erased too much. Alright, so now I'm going to fill the whole thing in with shading, and if you look at how I'm holding my pencil, I'm not holding it how I normally would. So I'm holding it like this so I can have really, really light pressure with the pencil, because this needs to be really, really, really light shading. Like I'm barely putting any pressure on the paper at all. So try holding your pencil like I am, so that you can hold it really, really lightly and have barely any tension in your hand. And we're just going to fill the whole lips with just very, very light and even light coat of shading. So now we're going to blend that. For this, because my drawing's a bit bigger, I'm using the tissue to blend, but you can use your Q-tip to blend as well, and we're just blending and smudging all of that shading that we just added. So the whole drawing should just be a light gray color. And now that I've blended and smudged, I'm going to go along the edges and I'm going to clean up the edges. smudge a little more in some areas that I missed. Alright, so now I'm going to start to add some darker shading. So all along this middle line that separates the two lips, I'm going to add some darker shading. So this time I'm adding more pressure with my pencil because I want this shading to be darker. And the shading is going to cover this line, and the shading is gonna go on both the top lip and the bottom lip. So on both sides of that line. And then it's gonna go all the way to each corner of the mouth. Erase there where I went out of the lines. And I'm gonna blend that shading, so I'm using my Q-tip now to blend that shadow that I just made in the middle of the mouth. Now I'm gonna clean up the edges again with my eraser. Alright, now I'm going to create another dark shadow that's going to be right underneath the middle part of the bottom lip. And it's going to go up the sides just a little bit. And I'm using that paper again to just prevent me from smudging my drawing. So the main bulk of the shadow is going to be at the bottom there, but some of the shadow is going to go up the sides a little bit. And now I'm going to blend that shadow with my Q-tip. Go in and clean some things up with my eraser. Alright, so now I'm adding a shadow that's gonna go along the bottom lip. It's gonna follow the curve of the bottom lip, but if you look at my shadow, the shadow is not reaching all the way to the bottom of the lip. I am leaving a little gap there where there's no shading. So I want to leave an area around the edge there that's lighter, because that's something that's called reflected light. So light is bouncing around and is reflecting and illuminating the bottom of that shape. So now I'm going to blend that shadow I just did. So you can really see now that area at the bottom, like a little halo of light. I'm going to go back in with my eraser to emphasize that reflected light even more along the bottom and a little bit up on the sides as well. And I'm going to sort of just blend the edges of that highlight so that it looks like it fits in more. Alright, so now I'm going over that line that separates the two lips so I can darken it up and emphasize it more. I'm going pretty hard with my pencil now so I can get it darker. And now I'm going to be darkening up the corners of the mouth. This is pretty dark shading at this point. The two corners of your mouth are going to be pretty dark. And I'm also going to add a shadow underneath that line. This is a pretty dark shadow as well. The shadow's going to be bigger in that middle part. Now I'm going to blend that shading with my Q-tip. And just to emphasize that line again, because sometimes if you blend too much, you'll lose some outlines and you'll lose some definition. So I'm just going back in and adding more definition to that line. Now, in the two corners of the mouth, there's going to be little shadows, sort of where the mouth is upturned. And then I'm also going to use my Q-tip to blend the outline of the upper lip, because you don't want it to be necessarily an outline. That's not going to look natural. It should be a bit more light and a bit more smudged. Now I'm going in underneath the bottom lip to that shadow, because that shadow should be pretty dark. So I'm going back in and I'm adding even more darker shading right underneath the edge of it, and then smudging it, blending it with my Q-tip. Alright. And now I'm going to add a shadow that's going to go along the top lip. This one is a pretty light shadow. It's not as dark as the shadow on the lower lip. But again, I'm leaving a little bit of space at the top because there's going to be a highlight there. I'm going to blend this right now with my Q-tip. So then I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a little highlight right at the, it's called the Cupid's bow, at the top there. So I'm going in and erasing a highlight. And then just blending a little bit more. Alright. So now we're going to start to create the actual texture of the lips, the little wrinkles of the lips. So when you do this, you do not want to draw straight lines. So on the left side of the drawings, your line should be curving to the left. Once they get towards the middle, they should straighten out a bit, but then once you go more towards the right side, they should start to curve to the right. You want to make sure the lines follow the curve of the lips. And the lines are going to start at the middle crease and then go out. They're not going to cover the whole lip. They're not going to go all the way across. They're just going to start from the middle and go out. And now I'm going to take my Q-tip, just so that these lines don't look as intense. I'm going to just sort of smudge each one with my Q-tip. And I didn't think those lines looked curved enough, so I went back and I drew more curved lines. So it's really important to have those lines follow the curves of the lips. So on the left side of the lips, they should be curving to the left. They straighten out a bit as they get towards the center, but then now as you go to the right, they should curve to the right. So now I'm adding a little bit of shading to each of those lines, starting from the middle. And just at the base of each line, I'm just extending that shadow from the middle into each of the lines, if that makes sense. So I'm not darkening up the whole line, I'm just darkening up the base of each line where it meets that middle shadow. And gonna blend it again so it looks softer. If you don't blend these lines, or if these lines look too harsh, your lips are gonna look like way too wrinkly and like chapped. Doing it again with the top. And again, these lines shouldn't, the lines start in the middle and they go out a bit, but they don't go all the way, especially the top lip. The lines don't go all the way to the top. They start at the middle and they go about a third of the way up and then they stop. So now I'm darkening up that middle line again, because every time you start blending and blending and smudging too much, you're going to lose some of the darkness and definition of some of your darker shadows, so you're going to have to go back in and add more shading and add more definition. Just blending a little bit. And now I'm darkening that shadow along the bottom of the lower lip, but again still leaving that reflected light at the bottom there. And blending it. And darkening that shadow below the bottom lip, especially in the middle there. And in the middle of the line that separates our two lips, I'm darkening up that shadow in there. And blending just a little bit. Alright, so now we get to go in and create highlights by erasing in between those lines. So you don't want to go too crazy, you don't want to add too many of these, because then again your lips will start to look really wrinkly and really chapped. And you should mostly just be focusing on creating highlights in the middle of the lips. The biggest highlights should be in the middle, and then there should only be a few on the sides. And when you're erasing in these lines, just like when you were drawing the lines, they should be curved as well. Like they should follow the same curves as your lips to show that the lips are curved and rounded. So I'm mostly focusing on creating highlights in the center there, and I'm just adding a few out on the sides. And you're going to have more highlights on the bottom lip than you have on the top lip. Alright, so now I'm going to start to draw in the area around the mouth. So I'm going to draw the philtrum right here, that little part that sort of dips in. Just a teardrop shape, and then I'm going to shade it lightly, and then I'm going to blend that shading. Then I'm going to create slightly darker shading around that bottom part of the philtrum, and then blend that. Now I'm going to accentuate these shadows at the corners of the mouth. And then I'm really light with my pencil for this. If you're too dark, it's going to make a mustache, which if you want a mustache, good for you, but for this one, I'm being really light, and I'm smudging it with my finger to get it to be like really nice and smooth. And I'm adding a little bit of shading on the other side, but I'm adding the shading mostly to one side. If I added equal shading on both sides, it would start to look more like a mustache. If you have most of the shading focused on one side, it makes it more obvious that it's a shadow. And then I'm erasing around the philtrum to create a highlight there, because there's a part where the skin sort of curves upward, so it's going to be lighter there. And then I'm creating a highlight right above the top edge of the upper lip by just erasing in there. And I really don't want that top edge of my lip to look like a really dark outline, because that won't look natural. So I went and I blended it a little more, but then I had to go back in and erase that highlight at the top there. Gonna do some more smudging with my finger to get everything to look nice and soft. Gonna darken up the two corners of my mouth again. And that shadow underneath the bottom and that shadow in the middle of the two lips. Gonna blend that a bit. Erase inside the Filtrem a little bit to lighten it up a little bit. Then smudge it. Just gonna add a few more highlights just in the middle of that bottom lip. Alright, and that's the finished product, so you can just pause the video and just compare it to yours and go back in and make any final touches, and thanks for watching.